Are we live or?
I think that's live. We're live.
Oh shit.
We're live.
All right. We're live. This is all technically just set up. This is mostly so that I can get a link to post. Yay. I'm not sure how this works. I'm just going to text it to myself. Just a sec. I'm an internet professional. Am I going to text it to myself? It's magical.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I am. I'm on T's computer too, so all of the scrolling is reversed from mine because we're special.
Jay's special.
I'm special.
Jay's special.
You've also still got notification noises on your computer,
I
so we might get a lot of those.
We can turn. You can turn the notification noises down.
We
could just mute my computer.
We could. That would definitely work. But I'm gonna see if I can get your message and post it to
now.
things. And yeah.
Okay. But no, like I have a brand new computer and it's all factory defaults. What?
You are so fancy. How are you so fancy?
Factory defaults. The factory defaults.
All right. This is good. I like our filler noises.
Our filler noises?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the link, but it's taking us from the internal studio link. This is very weird. You can anytime you want to.
Just wanna have fun.
Is there a share link? Oh, this is a share link, maybe. Let's see. There we go. All right, that's useful.
Oh,
Coffee.
Yeah.
That's the link I'm texting to myself.
I love you, Jay.
I'm an internet professional. Oh my God, I'm getting a text from my crush right now as we speak.
Except it's not really from your crush.
It's from my crush's computer. And here
you're texting yourself.
Here in the
text from your
the digital age, the difference between my crush and my crush's computer. This is getting into Daniel Dennett weird theory of MySpace.
Does your girlfriend live in Canada? No one's ever met her.
No.
Okay.
No, my wife lives in Queens in this house, and it would be weird if she were imaginary. Oops, that was an echo because I accidentally linked to my own thing. All right, I'm going to post this on Twitter and the Discord, and so hopefully this will exist. We are great at this. We are so good at live streaming. So good.
You're great at
Oh my
votes.
God. Okay. 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 I'm putting links. While T sings. Do you need to sing troll song?
Trolls just wanna have fun.
Uh-oh. ASCAP's gonna come for us. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I'm posting on Twitter now.
Fair use just wants to have fun.
Transformative Works just want to have fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. This exists.
Shout out to AO3.
I think someone is technically watching. We have someone on our chat channel who's calling themselves Pineapple Moose.
Hello.
We have 10. We have 10 people watching. At what point do we want to actually start doing things? We sort of planned some stuff, but
we did plan some stuff. Let me retweet this.
Casual and
then
half-assed planning.
People, I have a lot of
Hi, Robin.
followers. Hi, Robin. Hi,
right.
Pineapple Moose.
I'm not going to use my computer more, so I'm just going to put it on the shelf over here.
I'm going to retweet this.
I'm going to knit is what I'm going to do.
And
I wish we'd brought the peeps with us.
I'm sorry about the peeps.
We have so many peeps.
We have so many peeps and so many Oreos. Everybody else stocked up on toilet paper and hand sanitizer, and we stacked up on pancakes and maple syrup flavored peeps.
One of us stocked up on pancakes and maple syrup flavored peeps. The other one of us stocked up on root beer flavored peeps.
And Oreos in lots of interesting flavors. I have Trolls Oreos. I'm really excited about the Trolls Oreos because trolls just want to have fun.
So Tia's super obsessed with trolls, so I have been getting her small, strange novelty trolls things every time we go to the store. And one of those things is a candy holder that plays music.
Trolls just want to have fun.
And she's very excited about it. And we're going to see how that goes since we're working from home together.
Trolls just want to have fun.
So I hear that trolls just want to have fun. There are pancakes and maple syrup flavored peeps. We've only actually seen them at CVS. It may be that they are at other places. They're definitely not at the CVS we shop at because T bought them all.
No, I think I left like one package.
That was very magnanimous of you.
I'm a very, very generous person.
All right, so I guess we are officially doing this now.
We are doing?
So we should start about talking about Peeps. So we decided to create a channel where we basically talk about small things that are getting us through this ridiculousness. What we're not going to be talking about for the most part is actual useful pandemic advice.
Because neither of us are medical professionals.
You can find that both of us retweet a fair lot of it. We're both on Twitter. I'm not lasers.
I'm T-Berry Blue.
And if you don't know us, I'm Jay Edidin. I'm a writer and editor. I do the podcast Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men with Miles Stokes.
I'm T. Fugner. I am the editorial director for comics at King Feature Syndicate, which means I read comic strips all day long. It's great. Also, we're married, and we're in the room of our house that we have taken to referring to as the Budhole in the spirit of Jason Mendoza. That is basically a walk-in closet full of pillows and our printer and some other stuff. Everything you need. You can't see them right now, but there's a plush Frog and Toad and a plush Abed on the shelf, and also the Mike Murdoch head. Mike Murdoch's head. We also brought in a bunch of plushies so we can introduce you to like the toys of our childhood, because we're really big on sort of ridiculous comfort objects and generally having things in our home that make us happy to stumble back over. Which means that, for instance, you've got Bear, who is my teddy bear pretty much since birth, who you may recognize if you were here for the Picture Book Revolution live stream in 2016 under similarly ridiculous circumstances. Yes, and I have bear clops that Jay made for me while we were dating. There is also a Havoc Care Bear that T made for me who is not in here because his fur is dyed with Sharpies, and so he turns everything he is near slightly gray. But he has the best. I did surgery to his belly, and he has programmed LEDs, and he does Havoc belly things. Care Bear stares at you, so I'm very proud of him. But this is I, on the other hand, took a turned Bear Clops' head inside out and took a drill press to his eyes, and I've never felt more Mr. Sinister. How do we turn them on? Oh, I've got the switch. I've got the switch. Yeah, there's a switch somewhere. There's a switch. Is it doing anything? I don't know how long it would take the batteries to die either. Yeah, he's about 3 years old at this point. 4 years old. Sorry. I don't think he's spent long times lit, but there we go. Yay! Yeah, so that's Bear Clops with his powers and his optic blasts. Yes. Yeah, and we've got there are many other creatures. He's made out of a grumpy bear. He is, appropriately. We have the parts somewhere to making a Deadpool Care Bear for a friend of ours, which we've been intending to do for like 3 years. Yeah. Maybe that'll happen while we're virused in. I keep on thinking snowed in. Obviously, that's not what's happening because it's been in like the 60s and 70s here because New York's ridiculous. So neither of us are actually under quarantine. No. We haven't had any sort of serious contact but we both work for very awesome employers that take health really seriously and have us all working remotely. Well, and I have an employer. I work in an office that's about half remote all of the time, and I manage its only entirely remote department. So it's a very, very natural transition for me. I work from home a lot of the time anyway. I do not. And we've all been getting used to it, but my editorial team has been absolutely amazing, and my cartoonists have been absolutely amazing, and everybody's been really supportive, which is so great. So I hope that they all do really well too. Yeah, so we should also, I feel like we should add that we are not moderating the chat right now, so please be civil to one another. Be nice. We're pro civility. We are going to go look through it afterwards and make sure that you weren't all terrible, and if you were, we'll turn it off next time we do this. We're gonna take points away from you, or something. From your houses. You're gonna get a frowny face. We don't do house points because J.K. Rowling. Yeah, that's true. J.K. Rowling. But we do frowny faces. Do we? I feel like that's really high effort. What I was gonna say is that if you throw sand, then we're gonna close the sandbox next time. Okay, that sounds good. All right, so we were going to talk about some of the things that we've been doing that are just small comfort and time filling and adventures. And we talked a little bit about the Peeps already, but we have recently gotten fairly intensely into novelty Peeps. Because we both have ridiculous food allergies, and I have a lot that affect convenience and comfort foods especially. So we get very excited when there are ones that we can share that also have a novelty factor, because we don't get to try a bunch of new things a lot. Peeps are one of those things. And they came out with a lot of novelty flavors this year, and I went to CVS to pick up anxiety medication. And Jay bought all the novelty flavors. I came back with a tiny bottle of Ativan and an enormous shopping bag entirely full of novelty Peeps, because I make good life choices, and it was the middle of the night at CVS. So here's what we've found so far. The fruit punch ones are
absolutely vile.
The fruit punch ones actually taste like fruit punch, which, like, I'm not really impressed that they got that flavor since it's chemical flavor anyway.
Yeah.
But
like, just lick a peep and dip it in Kool-Aid powder.
The texture of the fruit punch ones is really, it's really...
it's melty. It's the wrong texture.
It's like eating a bath bomb kind of thing.
No, if it were a bath bomb, it would be crunchy. It would be like those fizzy candies.
Yeah.
These are like... Oh, these are stale in the ways that, like...
They're not stale, though.
No, but they're the texture of something that's been exposed to too much moisture.
Yes. Okay, that's a perfect example.
Which is what I think of as a component of staleness.
So I don't know if any of you have ever made homemade marshmallows. The texture is like homemade marshmallows that you didn't leave the sugar cooking for quite long enough. So they're bad. However, on the opposite end of that spectrum, texture-wise, are the chocolate pudding peeps.
Those, so really I like those a lot more than tea does, but I think that's more flavor.
I think
they're really, really dense, but they're peeps texture, and I think they're great. I think they're really cool. They're kind of they're satisfying fresh in a way that normally peeps are only satisfying when they're stale.
I like peeps fresh.
I like peeps stale.
This is like Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could not eat stale peeps.
With our powers combined.
So yeah, no, I don't like the flavor of those ones so much because they taste a little bit like that chemically chocolate flavor that, like, you know, like the shelf stable Jell-O pudding taste.
See, I like that flavor. I like actual chocolate, but I also actually like the flavor of artificial weird chocolate. Like, it's one of those weird things that I enjoy.
Pudding. I like Cozy Shack. If they make
Cozy Shack is amazing.
Peeps, I'd be so happy.
What about Cozy Shack rice pudding peeps? Because I'm on the fence here. What if they were like covered in like crisp rice with marshmallow on the inside, like sort of deconstructed rice crispy
treats? I think once it's covered with crisp rice, it's not a peep anymore. There's going to be a whole separate argument about this. That's like the taco sandwich thing, and our hot dog's a sandwich. Yes. Our ice cream cone's a sandwich. No. Our cucumber is a sandwich. I feel like that's a trick question. Anyway, on to other flavors. So what else did we get? So there are two that seem very close to the original peeps, and those are the cotton candy ones and the birthday cake ones. Those are both just a shade off from standard. They're both great. They're both very good. They have like these little like confetti things. They're like funfetti peeps on the outside. They don't change the texture. They don't really. Yeah, they change the texture of the outside, but they don't change the inside. They're delicious. Mm-hmm. They taste a little bit like the difference between like white frosting and vanilla frosting. So we liked them, but we wouldn't say that they're like indispensable life-changing experiences. Yes. However, the ones that are. All right. What are you should talk about your favorites? Okay, so they make pancake and syrup flavored peeps. And so being from New York State, which is technically the world's largest producer of maple syrup. It's not Vermont. Oh, Vermont's going to come fight us now. It's not Vermont. It's Canada, maybe the United States. I'm not going to fight Canada. They're going to like please me to death. But it's very Barbarella of them. So they're mapley and delicious, and it's like, oh, they're so good. Really quickly, Queen Cognito, in response to your question, are you to take away from this the different peep varieties actually taste different? Yes, they do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they totally do. No, so the pancake ones, they taste like maple syrup, basically. They're delicious. They kind of taste more like very light maple syrup, like the maple syrup you're going to get at like the diner. They taste like Mrs. Butterworth. They taste like non-maple fake syrup. They taste like maple flavored syrup. They're so good. Oh, though. They are to maple as the chocolate pudding ones are to chocolate, which actually also explains why I don't like them that much, because I don't like that maple version. So, they're so good. And you do. So I like them. I bought all but one package from the local CVS because I am a socially responsible person who doesn't hoard toilet paper. We don't hoard toilet paper. We somewhat hoard peeps. So my favorites are the root beer float ones, and that's a flavor that tends to work pretty well in marshmallows. Root beer floats, marshmallows are pretty good too, but it's also a flavor and sort of a concept in a food that works on texture contrast. And while this is a different contrast of two textures, it kind of carries that over really nicely. Yeah, no, the root beer ones are good. They're not my favorite of them. The pancake ones are my favorite, but they're really good. They're up there. Yeah. I mean, since Jay mentioned Smashmallow, I just want to shout out to Smashmallow. You make amazing marshmallows, but
which we can't eat anymore.
Which we used to be able to eat, but you changed your processing, and now I don't remember what.
Is it that they have? I think they have sunflower oil now.
They have something Jay's allergic to.
Yeah. So I'm allergic to a lot of things, but the one relevant here is sunflower oil, which is in a ton of commercially produced snack foods and candies and everything else, and like half the restaurants in the world. And the entire country of the Czech Republic is completely saturated in it.
It was so bad.
So yeah, Peeps are exciting. Peeps, don't add that. And also Peeps are processed. Just Born is a completely peanut-free facility, which is great because that's another thing I'm allergic to, and they're not co-processed.
It's because you got to be careful around babies, and they're just born.
And we eat them.
Yeah.
All right. So we've covered nutrition, and we're going to talk about other stuff. But first, we can do another round of introducing.
Oh, we can introduce
things.
More creatures.
So this is Gimel. Gimel is a sloth, I guess. Gimel is supposed to be a sloth. Part of why I like Gimel is that Gimel has a really unsettling face that doesn't quite look like any real creature. I'm just going to get up close to the webcam
so you can all be unsettled.
So Gimel is named after a cyborg from the Marge Piercy novel He, She, and It, and Gimel is sort of the malfunctioning older cyborg that doesn't quite work right, and I love him, and he's good and important. Gimel also has Velcro hands, and I bought Gimel at New York Comic Con this year, which is a slightly off-brand decision for me because I try not to buy big things that I'll have to carry around, but I was really overwhelmed and panicked and just sort of overloaded. And I found this booth where they were selling these soft, squishy things, and most of them had a texture I had trouble with. But Gimel doesn't have that like cloudy, your hands rasp on it stuff, but he's still super, super soft. So I got him, and I just sort of carried him around for a whole day and let anyone who needed to hug him. And he was great and extremely grounded. Very kind. I took him to visit the King Features booth a bunch of times.
Yes.
So this is Gimel. Gimel is sort of on the opposite age range from Bear.
Yes. So I have this one is both very old but very new to me, but very old. For those of you who know anything about Popeye, you may be familiar with Eugene the Jeep. Eugene the Jeep is a creature from the fourth dimension. He is magical and he can travel through space and time. And he says, Jeep, Jeep. So he's sort of like a precursor to Pokemon because he can say his name.
He's sort of like Sailor Pluto.
He's sort of like, well, he's no, because
I guess she's just the guardian of space.
He's not the guardian, but he is like a Sailor Moon villain because he can say his name.
Well, much like Eugene the Jeep, I can also travel through space and time, just in fewer directions.
So yes, we can all travel through space and time. Anyway, Jeep is very wonderful. He is a little mischief maker, and I love him. But we did a clean out of the King Features storage unit a couple weeks ago, and I brought Jeep home with me from the storage unit. So now he lives with us.
All right. So we figured we'd move on and talk about some of the stuff we've been doing that's been filling time. And we should do a more thorough Sailor Moon thing later. But we've been watching a bunch of Sailor Moon. I brought up Sailor
Moon.
So much Sailor Moon. But one of the things that we both do a lot of is read. And one of the things that we do most is read together. And our current bedtime read aloud book is Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire, which is the fifth. Yeah, which is I think the fifth of the Wayward Children books. This is a novel series that we both absolutely love. The official qualifier is that Seanan is a really good friend of ours, and so we're biased. I will add to that I got really into her work before I knew her, so
I got into her work after I knew her, so I'm very biased. Yeah,
so we are biased as hell. But this is a wonderful series. This is about the kids who fall down rabbit holes or go through doors into other worlds and come back different.
Yes, so it's basically
have to sort of try to adjust.
It's basically like, for those of you who've read the Narnia books, it's basically like the Narnia kids when you get to Prince Caspian and they all came back from Narnia and they were alive in Narnia and were adults and kings and queens. And then they have to go back to school. But it's like a whole bunch of kids who went to all different worlds who are dealing with that.
It's definitely got some shades of the beginning of the Return to Oz movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's super like Return to Oz. Yeah. No. And there's a lot of that.
Which completely traumatized me as a little kid.
Are like, the parents don't know what to do with their children and they think their children are crazy. And like in Return to Oz, where they try to do like, what do they try to like?
They're about to send Dorothy in for shock treatment. Like that's how the movie starts.
Yeah, they're going to shock treatment Dorothy. Yeah. And then so it's like that, but it's basically a school for those kids where a woman who'd been one of those children herself and came back intact, was able to start a school where she sort of gathers those kids to one place and gives them space to be themselves, because a lot of them are very a lot of them are very changed by their experiences, and some of them were different to start, and their experiences helped them accept their differences.
Yeah, so this is a series, by the way, that does a phenomenal job and a very deliberate job with intersectional representation.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of there's fat representation, there's disabled representation, there's a lot of different cultural and racial representation. And one of the things that's made it really deeply important to me is that there is a transmasculine character in it, is a trans man named Cade, who specifically sews. And that's a really big deal, because I think there's a lot of pressure. I mean, I'm trans, and there's something that I really struggled with initially, was what felt like pressure to be performative masculine in ways that involved not publicly engaging with things that would increase the odds of my being read as female. And I sew, and I do a lot of fiber arts and a lot of crafting. And actually, I'm going to talk about knitting a little bit later in this live stream. And having a character who was specifically just that tiny detail was really cool to find and stumble on. And yeah, it's a good series, and it's one that's become really important to both of us. It's also great if you are part of a couple, or if you are a parent with a kid for whom it would be appropriate. We'll say, like, the content is complicated, and I'm not going to content warnings it, but I'm going to say that if you have a kid who's younger than, I'd say, like 12 or 13, and you want to read it aloud to them or read it with them, I'd recommend reading it first, because you're going to be a better gauge of what works maturity-wise than we necessarily are.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's just a question of gauging whether some of the stuff might be too scary,
or too specifically disturbing.
Yeah, for certain kids. But yeah, they're phenomenal. And for me, I'm Ace. The very, very first book has an Ace protagonist, which is amazing. And one of the great things about the Ace protagonist is that she also clearly has romantic interests, which I think a lot of people get Ace and Arrow confused and think that you have to be both. So that's really nice to see. But the current book is Come Tumbling Down, which
Put that up there again. And it came out in February, I believe.
Which really focuses on a girl named Jack, who was one of the main characters of a previous book in the series called Down Among the Sticks and Bones.
Yep, Down Among the Sticks and Bones is Jack and Jill's backstory.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really love about those books is I had a brother who died a few years ago, and my brother had some fairly severe mental illness issues. And so for me, Jack and Jill's relationship is very difficult. Jill in particular has a lot of challenges that make her in some ways a dangerous person, even though Jack really loves her. And so for me, reading a book like that and reading a sibling relationship like that, you don't see them very often. So it was really important to me to get to see a sibling relationship that dealt with a character who recognized that their sibling was dangerous and could actually hurt them, but who still loved their sibling and wanted to protect their sibling and do right by their sibling anyway. Because that's not a thing, it's really not a thing that comes up in fiction very often.
One of the things I love most about Shannon as a writer, and I mean as a human being too, because I feel like this is something that's very much something that's true of her that extends into her writing, but is also something she very deliberately does in her writing, is that she's really consistent and really good about representing very complex relationships between people and aspects of their own experiences and selves, and just
between people and cars.
Between people and cars. That is between people and cars who are actually also their teenage boyfriends. It's complicated. Read the Ghost Roads books. They were my first introduction to her was the Sparrow Hill Road stories, which are amazing, but are a set of interconnected short stories about a vanishing hitchhiker ghost from her perspective. There are now 2 books of them. I love them very much. The Unicorn Empire people did covers for them, which are
they're so good.
But yeah, just complex people and relationships. And there's I don't tend to find saccharine things reassuring. Like, yeah, happy endings where everyone is wholesome and all relationships are entirely healthy and stuff like that. Like, I get the value of them, but things that are complex and difficult, but in which people can still sustain and exist and move on and live in the world are my comfort food.
Yeah.
So that's something that I very much love in Shannon's books.
Yeah.
Speaking of characters like that, actually, we each brought in one of our childhood favorite books to tell you about. And one of mine, which is very much reflects that as well, is Midnight Hour Encores by Bruce Brooks. This is a first edition I ordered from the internet because I discovered they were really cheap, and it's technically out of print, and I'm sorry, I'm recommending an out of print book. But it's phenomenally good. It's about a girl named Sibilance who is a cello prodigy and also she's 16. She's extremely, extremely smart for her age.
What's her full name, Jay?
Her full name is Sibilance Teasponer. The T does not stand for anything. And she renamed herself under complicated circumstances, and she's got a kind of complex, peculiar origin story and a very atypical relationship with her father, who's a single parent and with whom she's very close. And this is a book from her perspective, and it's a book that I first read and loved when I was maybe 9 and got a copy of. And this is my 3rd or so copy, just because it's one of those books that I tend to repeatedly give away or read until it's falling apart. Because the way Sibilance talks and experiences the world reflects aspects of being a profoundly gifted kid and teenager, especially, in ways you almost never see in fiction. She's got that combination of sophistication and immaturity and that sort of asymmetrical development, and also just that absolute moral certainty of being 16 and that bright. And it's a phenomenally good book. And she also has complex sexuality in ways that you don't see a lot in high school characters. But it's beautiful and brilliant and amazing. And yeah, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. What got me into it first is the first chapter. I'm going to read you the very beginning of it, actually.
Yes, do it.
Because it's out of print. And not going to read you the whole thing because it's not in the public domain. And I think Bruce Brooks is still alive.
Bruce Brooks is still alive, and he's writing nonfiction these days.
Good. Well, they should bring this back into print. But the first sentence of this is, when I was 9, suddenly all the other girls in the 4th grade were horse freaks. Now, when I was 9, actually, I think all of the girls in my class got to be horse freaks a little bit earlier, but I was one of those kids who didn't quite get it. And Sibilance is also one of those kids who does not quite get the horse thing. And so from this, this book had me from the first sentence, which is super rare for me. And now, decades later at 37, it really still does.
When I was 9, all the other girls were horse freaks. I couldn't understand horses unless they were unicorns or pegasi. If they were fantasy horses, then they were super cool. But horses that weren't fantasy horses were dumb.
We also, long, long, long ago, it's funny reading the beginning of this on YouTube, because long ago when we were dating long distance, we would make each other private locked YouTube videos that were part of how we corresponded. And one of the things that we did, T played me a lot of songs on the ukulele.
Yes.
And I read a lot of picture books to her. And later on, we started reading each other chapter books aloud and just having that on YouTube. And Midnight Hour Encores was the first book that I read to her.
So ironically, I had actually read Midnight Hour Encores. I met Bruce Brooks. He came to my mom's college when my mother went back to school when I was 8 or 9. And I read Midnight Hour Encores probably way too young for it, and I hated it. I had a signed copy. I've been trying to find my signed copy to give it to Jay since we were dating. I can't find it. I might have given it away because I didn't like the book.
That's okay. I mean, I feel like if I have a copy that has all the words in it, that's the important thing to me. But then
when Jay read it back to me, it made so much more sense to me as an adult. It also was kind of cool because I kind of remembered she was a cellist and that was about it.
Yeah.
And then there'd be these moments where Jay would be reading, I remember this part, I know what's coming next, and it was great. So that was very cool. It's a good book. Highly recommended. I think highly recommend for a lot of the folks who are probably watching this right now, because I know that a lot of you are people who are maybe, coming out of that whole being the different kid.
Sibilance is also not specifically coded as, but is arguably readable as a teenage girl on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is cool. I should say also, actually, in connection to the last book, the only other person I've met who's not only read this book, but who imprinted on it as hard as I did as a kid is actually Sean McGuire. So Which is why I have 2 first editions, because one of them is for her and I was going to give it to her at Emerald City, but I guess I'm going to need to mail it now.
Yeah. Oh, Emerald City.
Yeah.
We were going to be there this weekend.
We'll see. Well, I mean, we'll not see we won't be there this weekend, but
Well, it's going to be the week after FlameCon now, so I don't know what the likelihood of going. At least for me, I don't know what it's going to be because I'm one of the FlameCon organizers. Jay is doing a little bit more. I am on a
committee, but I am slightly less globally responsible than T.
Yeah.
But we are here now, and with us, I think you've actually you've got the first book you read to me too.
Yeah, did I read this to you?
You did, yeah.
I didn't remember.
Oh no, wait, no, you didn't. You mailed me a copy.
I mailed it to you.
You mailed me a copy.
Like right when we first started dating. But this is a book that I actually bought for Jay before we started dating, and I bought him a copy of it and was going to mail it to him because I knew he was having a really hard time with some things. And that was like basically like right before he sent me a very nice email that was very but anyway, there were feelings, an email full of feelings.
We're married now.
We're married now. But it's a book that, like Midnight Hour Encores for Jay, I've gone through a lot of copies because I buy it and give it to people. It's out of print in the US. I buy the copies from the UK and have them shipped here. But I think it's an important enough book that I do that. So it's called Momo, and it's by Michael Anda, who you may know as the person who wrote The Never-Ending Story. I don't know, how many of you have read the book, The Never-Ending Story, but I know that a lot of you have probably seen the movie. So Momo is one of my favorite books of all time. I think the first time I read it, I was about 9 years old. I love this book with all my heart. It is about a little girl who doesn't have a family and lives in an amphitheater in a town in Italy. But the important part of the story is that one day these mysterious men in gray show up, and their goal is to steal people's time. And it's really a book about, it's kind of a book about late stage capitalism.
It's very much, it's if The Stranger were a really beautiful, lovely children's book about a combination of late stage capitalism in some ways. I
tend to describe it as kind of being the other way. It's sort of like the dystopian version of The Little Prince.
Yeah, I can see that too.
So these men in gray come and they're trying to steal people's time, and
mostly by convincing people that it's an incredibly finite resource that they have to hoard.
And that they have to save time. And Momo is really the only one who sees through their plot. And it's really about her trying to save her friends. But more importantly than that, it's really a story about stories. It's about, Momo is incredibly imaginative, but she's also an amazing listener. And everyone who knows her is sort of inspired to tell her stories. And her best friend is a young man. So he's significantly older than her.
Spoiler, no random.
It's not weird.
Not that kind of
but her best friend is a young man named Guido who wants to be a storyteller, and all he wants to do is tell stories.
Lucia, this is the book you're asking after. Midnight Hour Encores.
Yeah. So and so this whole story, like, you've got the main story going on, but you also have all of these little bits about storytelling and what it means to be a storyteller, and what it means to be a listener, and what it means to be a collaborative listener, and how listeners and audiences help storytellers. So it's just one of those books that I imprinted on when I was a very small duck, and I love it to death. And the best thing, well, not the best thing, because the best thing is the actual story, but I have a very early copy of it, and you're not going to be able to see on the video, but the first American edition of it is printed in brown ink, which is just like the coolest thing.
That's such a good detail.
Yeah. So it's just highly recommend, if you can find a copy, highly, highly, highly recommend reading it. It's a pretty short read. I used to have a copy that I had like a color coded underline scheme where different themes were underlined in different colors. And I loaned that one to a friend, which was a bad mistake. But it's still a book that means so much to me and has so many like important touchstones. And yeah.
That cover is very, very Return of the Dapper Man.
Oh, yeah.
Only sort of the opposite.
Yeah.
So what else were we going to do? We were going to talk about non-book things.
You want to talk about knitting.
Right. We were talking about other stuff. So I knit. And I tend to have multiple projects going. And I pretty much always have projects that are divided by utility based on the fact that I commute on public transit in New York. But I'm working from home right now. So I'm sort of shifting the rules of those. So I always have sort of one big complicated have to have the pattern in front of me thing, at least one going. Right now, most of the stuff I'm making is baby focused because I also have a very, very, very new niece, goddaughter, who I'm not going to be able to go visit, which is, but who was amazing and who was very new and was very premature. And I can't do a lot and I can't like show up at her parents' house and do their laundry for them, but I can knit, damn it. So I've been knitting a lot. But what I also always try to have is something like what I'm working on right now, which is something that that's small, handheld, and that I can do without a pattern. So this is a really basic double knit baby hat. You can tell it's double knitting is where you knit both sides of a reversible thing at once. So with two different yarns. So on this, it's sort of opalescent white on the outside and kind of a sea blue on the inside. There are two layers. And later on, when it gets further up, it's going to have a pattern and look kind of pixelated and go from transition from one to the other. But I like knitting because it's a thing that can take any amount of focus. So this, I don't really need to pay attention to. I can work on it while I'm talking. I can work on it while T's talking and listening. And I'm listening to her and actually pay attention and listen. I can work on it and I can't watch TV with my full attention because it's visual while I'm working on this, but I can with a lot of simpler knitted things. But I've also got, you know, a project that's going on that's in the living room that really takes my full attention, that I have to pay attention to, count stitches as I go. And so if I need something that's just rhythmic and physically simple but straightforward to focus on, it's great for that too. And the results are kind of neat, soft stuff. I've also been looking for small things that I can knit and just mail to anyone who wants them during sort of social distancing, because I know that's rough for a lot of folks. And I love the U.S. Postal Service and want to single-handedly keep it open. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not at the point with those where I'm comfortable doing an open call yet, but hopefully I will get there by the next time we do one of these. So you brought another book.
I did bring another book. I was gonna play ukulele for everybody, but my ukulele is very out of tune, and I think I need to restring it because it's got ukuleles have nylon strings, which means that after a while they stretch out and they make terrible noises no matter what you do. So my ukulele is at the point where it's making terrible noises no matter what I do. And while I'm sure that some of you would enjoy hearing terrible noises, I don't know that all of you would enjoy hearing terrible noises, and I wouldn't do that to anybody without their full consent. So
one of the great things about it, though, is that it's really ominous sound. Like it's untuning itself in ominous ways. And ukuleles are not usually an ominous instrument, so it's been kind of fun to listen to.
Yeah, so no, it's very bad. I have a really beautiful, I have two ukuleles. I have one mahogany ukulele, one acacia ukulele. Acacia is pretty much the closest thing you can get in the contiguous US to the kind of wood that they were traditionally made with in Hawaii, or are traditionally made with in Hawaii. They're still sometimes made with that wood in Hawaii, but it's not as common these days. And so I love that one, and that they both need restringing, but yeah. Anyway,
there's probably, I keep on thinking, I'm doing this in front of people. I feel like I need to qualify. There's probably a faster and better way to hold the string for this, but this is the only the second thing I've ever double knit. So yeah, we'll see.
But I brought a book that for me is a really great book, particularly for reading in sort of like, you know, trying times, end of the world scenarios. Not that I think that the world's really going to end, but anytime things get semi-apocalyptic. And that book is How to Cook a Wolf by MFK Fisher. And MFK Fisher is a food writer, who wrote really beautiful, brilliant essays about food. And this is a book that was specifically about food shortages during World War II. So How to Cook a Wolf is literally about how to cook a wolf. And a lot of this book is about how to cope in crises using food. So it's just a really wonderful book to read. I think especially since a lot of people right now I know are very nervous about food. I know I've seen a lot of questions on Twitter from people who are wondering how should they stock up? How much should they stock up? Should they be eating the food that they're stocking now or saving it for later? So reading a book by a really brilliant food writer who lived through true crisis food shortages and really lived through some times of starvation and desperation when it came to food. You know, when it's somebody for whom food is really important and who loves to cook and was a brilliant cook as well as a writer, I think can be really helpful. It's a book that I was first introduced to in high school. I think we read like one essay.
We read a little bit. I think I remember reading that when we were staying at your folks' place on Long Island, like the first time I visited.
It has an essay in it called How to Be Cheerful Through Starving. It has an essay called How to Make a Pigeon Cry, How to Boil Water. And it actually has recipes and how-tos in it. So for those of you who maybe, you know, are trying not to go out to eat as much or not to order delivery as much and are trying to learn about cooking and maybe learning a little bit about cooking in a time where you might want to ration.
Or if you learn better when there's a narrative context to what you're learning.
It's a really cool book because most of the recipes in it are written.
They're accessible.
They're accessible and there's a story built around each of them, which is really nice because it really, you know, you can read about, you know, maybe when she recommends eating this thing. Or a time that she made this thing. So it's a really cool book. MFK Fisher wrote so many essays and they're collected into several different volumes, but this has always been my favorite.
So one of the things that you brought up in that sort of cooking if you're not used to cooking or ordering, brings up for me something that's been really, really central to this crisis and to the circumstances of it, which is that this is, you know, crises are highly, highly regional.
Yes.
And that's something that I know. That I grew up in South Florida, where, you know, in hurricane country. I moved then to Western North Carolina, which wasn't supposed to be hurricane country, but became hurricane country while I was living there. And this is when I say Western North Carolina, I mean up in the Appalachian Mountains, so like the very western tip of the state that normally does not get hit by the stuff that doesn't get touched by the stuff that hits the coast. And then from there went to Portland, Oregon, which doesn't tend to get a ton of natural disasters, but has its own local crises and responds, among other things, to snow and ice very differently. So this has been kind of my first big thing in New York City. And it's been a really different experience. And I gather from talking to friends who live in other parts of the city and in other boroughs that it's been a very different experience for us in Queens than it has been for them necessarily. Yeah. But I kind of wanted to ask you some questions about that. Because you mentioned food and takeout. And one of the things that works well for us is that New York has a massive, massive, massive food delivery ecosystem that already exists.
Yes.
Which really changes the circumstances of being essentially homebound here, assuming that it's something you have financial access to.
Yeah.
But you've lived here pretty much all your life, and you've been here through the blackout, through Sandy, through a massive amount of stuff. Yeah. And you've got a lot of stories about that. So what would you say is specific to New York or is specific to your experience of New York in terms of how it responds as a city and a community to this stuff?
So I think one of the things that's really interesting to me about New York or really valuable to me about New York, and this, I'm going to say this isn't blanket true. There are a lot of terrible people in New York. There's a lot of terrible people.
Shout out to the lady at Key Foods yesterday.
Ooh. There's a lot of terrible people in New York. There are a lot of terrible people everywhere. But New York is a very community-oriented city.
Yeah.
And what that means is that, you know, and it's a very culturally diverse city in ways that go beyond just people talking about representation in a surface way.
Yeah. Queens, where we live, has more distinct languages spoken than any other city on earth.
We have over 700 languages spoken in Queens. So it's a place where there are a lot of truly international communities. And bilingual and trilingual and quadrilingual people.
And very much sort of the Bouillabaisse type of integration where you have a lot of intermingling and interconnected cultures.
Yeah.
But well, I'm not going to say very little because also I'm speaking outside of my experience, but the pressure to assimilate is not what it is in a lot of smaller towns.
Yeah, I would say there is pressure to assimilate, but there's also the option to live in places where it's not as expected while living in New York City. It's still, a city that has a lot of problems with segregation. It's a city that has a lot of problems with class differences between neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And
definitely has racism.
Oh yeah. But one of the things for me that was really interesting was, I think, right after 9/11. I know there was, when there was even in New York, there was a lot of violence against Middle Eastern people, against Indian people and Sikh people, and anybody whose skin happened to be a shade of brown where they might get confused for someone from the Middle East. And but there were also a lot of people who were making an active effort specifically to go out to Middle Eastern restaurants, and we've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
The past couple of weeks here.
We've been trying to shop predominantly in Asian-owned grocery stores. And grocery stores
but specifically people saying, "Hey,
having a rough time.
If we're gonna go out to eat, if we're gonna order takeout, let's get Chinese. Let's make sure that these businesses that might be getting hurt by the people in our communities who are racist are also getting uplifted a little bit by the people who do care."
There's also a lot of people just checking in on each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of really, one of the things that I think, I don't think it's universal, but I think there's enough of it that's diffuse and spread enough that it's defining in some ways, is kind of a collectivist sense of, well, we're all in this together, whatever that happens to mean for us. And so there's a lot of casual conversation, a lot of people checking up on each other, and a lot of, I've had more passing, how are you doing? Is there anything you need conversations with neighbors in the last week than in the previous 2 years put together.
And not even just neighbors. We went to the grocery store today and the guy at the grocery store was like, "How are you doing? Stay safe." And this was a grocery store we'd never been to before. It's a brand new grocery store that literally just opened a couple weeks ago, and we hadn't gotten to go there yet. It's a Japanese grocery store in town, and the guy was just like, he literally, his last words to us after we got our purchases was "stay safe."
Yeah. He also did something brilliant, which I have not seen any other business owners doing, and which is genius, which is that he had slightly diluted alcohol in his spray bottle and was actually asking people if they wanted it sprayed on their hands as they were leaving. Yeah. Which was genius.
Yeah. So I think it's it's a city where people try to give people advice, try to make sure that everybody knows how to stay safe.
Yeah.
That people who, may not have everything they need have ways of getting the things they need.
Yeah. And different neighborhoods handle that in different ways. Our friend Alex lives in Midtown Manhattan in Hell's Kitchen. And during the last big blackout there this past summer, was talking about her neighbors of hers who were standing and before the cops were there directing traffic with plastic lightsabers.
Yes.
Which is really neat. There's something that's really cool here that I've seen a lot of since moving is less diffusion of responsibility.
Yeah, it's
there's a sense that this is going to be a bad analogy. I went to a work college where basically all of the students had work study scholarships, and the students were responsible for a huge amount of campus maintenance. And the sense of collective ownership and responsibility was really striking as compared to a lot of the other colleges and universities and campuses I've been to. And New York, and especially parts of New York, feel that way as a city.
Yeah, I also think that municipally we are like that. Again, lots of problems. It's a big city. There's always going to be problems.
And some of those problems are systemic.
Our police department is real bad. But we also have things like a citywide ID that you can get without any proof of citizenship.
Right.
Because it became very obvious a few years ago that, people who are undocumented living in New York need to have some kind of official ID. And, you know, in a lot of cases, people are worried about what happens if I try to get a driver's license.
Well, and that this also needs to exist in a way that that ownership of it will not identify people by default
exactly.
as that. And so what they did was attach it to a lot of services that they knew that middle-class white people were going to want to use.
Right. So if you get the New York City ID, you have a citywide ID that gets you free access to a whole bunch of museums and gardens and parks.
And it also means that those places and those resources that really do belong to the community are accessible
yes.
on a much wider scale and a much more income agnostic scale, which is so important. Well, it's the curb cut principle. It's the really, really bloody, depressing capitalist principle that to make things accessible to marginalized people who actually need them, you need to find a compelling reason for people who don't actively need them to think that they would be better or more convenient to have.
Yes.
This is also what propels as seen on the entire genre of as seen on TV.
Yeah. Another thing that we have in New York is you can get free library books over Wi-Fi, and they have a curated selection I think it changes every month, of books that if you're in the subway, you can get them for free on your phone, which opens up being able to get free reading materials to a huge number of people who can't afford to buy books and may feel uncomfortable going into a library. It
also means that those things are still accessible with the libraries closed right now.
Yes. I mean, it's not really enough with the libraries closed, but it's, but there's still something there. So there's a lot of, focus on creating access for things that everybody's going to enjoy, but that are going to be really, make a big, significant quality of life difference to people who would suffer without them.
Something that I think is really important right now that we've been doing kind of by accident, but that I've been seeing in bits and pieces, is looking at community responses that work.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, like the US as a country is really, really not equipped or set up structurally, systemically, in any way to deal with what's going on right now, which ends up putting a lot more pressure on smaller communities and smaller municipal units than it should, but also on individuals. And one of the things I think that's most useful to do on an individual basis right now, because there's not a lot that you can do if, like us, we are not emergency care workers. We do not have the skills to go in and say, we're going to fix this. We're going to make this system. We're going to set up, home, deliveries or something.
I can sing the troll song in an emergency.
T can sing the troll song in an emergency. We're good with that. We are set if that comes up. I pretty much know the Jumblies by heart, and definitely I know the Chinese obelisks by heart.
Oh, I know every word of Les Mis.
In French too?
I know most of it in French, but there's 2 different French versions, and I know parts of each.
I'm still really impressed, though.
À la volonté du peuple et à la santé du progrès, remplis ton corps d'un vin rebelle et à de mal ami fidèle.
You just have to imagine this is accompanied by a ukulele. But anyway, I think one of the most useful things that individuals can do right now is keep an eye out for, spread the word for, and communicate about things they're seeing that are working and responses. It's basically being a worldwide, nationwide, however we're doing it, brainstorming network. And even in understanding where your own limitations and authority lie on that, being able to say, this is cool, and bring it to more people's attention is really neat.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've been trying to do also is, because we're both really plugged into the internet, looking for ways to build communities and connect with people and make connections for people online, because those are important.
Like doing this right now.
Like this right now. Hi, and there's a bunch of other stuff that's community specific, but we met online. We were friends online, and we were friends online with a lot of real life friends in common and an industry in common. But we met online, and we fell extremely in love via largely an epistolary and long distance relationship. And both of us have often had most of our most meaningful relationships online. And I think something that's going to be critically useful for folks right now is thinking about and pushing past the fallacy that remote relationships aren't real. They're not the same. They don't provide the same things in the same way.
You can't get oxytocin from rubbing your monitor.
Speak for yourself.
Well, okay.
No, but they're different and they're good. They're good, and finding ways to build and cherish those right now, even if it as an and instead of an instead.
Yes.
Is going to be something that helps a lot with resilience. So I think we're at almost an hour.
Oh, we've been on for a long time.
We have to make dinner.
We do have to make dinner.
Stuff.
So I'm going to do a real quick for because we were talking about people, trying to figure out cooking when you're not used to doing that.
Yeah.
So real quick thing that we've been doing, and I'm actually quite a good cook, but I don't cook very much.
Yeah,
on a day-to-day
likewise.
basis.
Well, we have this tiny galley kitchen, and we both work full time, and we're in New York, and takeout's really easy, and so we don't cook as much as we'd like to.
But a thing that I've been doing, and that really, even if you've never cooked before, is quite easy, is take a bunch of vegetables, pretty much any vegetables, cut them into chunks. Pretty much any size chunks.
Think about inch or two. Chunks about
any size chunks.
Yeah,
We're good. Didn't do it the easy way.
That's true.
Any size chunks.
Any size chunks.
Put them. If you have either a cake pan, so a metal pan with about a 2-inch side, or you have a Pyrex casserole dish.
You can do this on a cookie sheet too. You just have to be a little more careful not to spill.
Put aluminum foil on it because this is going to make it way easier. You won't have to do as many dishes later.
Yeah, you don't need the aluminum foil. It's just to make future use life easier.
Aluminum foil. Take all your chopped up vegetables. The only thing to remember is that when you're chopping vegetables, if you chop different types of vegetables, you want them to all be generally about the same size.
Roughly.
Don't do like one real tiny and one like this.
Don't do like whole potatoes and then really finely chopped broccoli.
Yeah.
That's going to end with broccoli on fire.
So take all your vegetables, put them on the aluminum foil. Pour a little olive oil on them.
Just like a couple tablespoons. We never even measure it. We just trickle some from the bottle.
Pour until it looks good.
Enough to coat them when you toss them.
Pour a little olive oil on them. Put a little salt on them. You can also put pepper on them. You can put garlic on them.
Paprika
garlic powder is okay. Whatever spices you normally like, you can stick those on them. Put the oven on at about 400.
You can do it lower if you want to leave it for a couple hours. If you're going to be going out and running errands, you can set it to like 350 and have this going while you're out of the house.
Stick them in the oven. Check them every 20 minutes, basically.
If you're not familiar with those vegetables in that process, we totally left vegetables in for an hour while we were running errands yesterday.
Yeah, but I'm basically saying check them every, because this is the easy way to do it when you're not doing it to a specific size. Yeah. Check them every 20 minutes. If you've eaten vegetables before, you'll know at what tenderness you like them. When they are tender the way you like them, take them out and eat them. And it's so easy to do, and it's really delicious and nourishing. And
they're also very good cold. They make really good leftovers.
You can
make
a bunch of them and reheat them. You can put them on rice. You can put them on quinoa. You can put them on oatmeal if you want. Whatever you want to do.
And while they're cooking, you can do other things. So it's a really good. It's a very good.
You don't have to watch.
It's good depression cooking, and it's good busy cooking, and it's good beginner cooking.
Yes. So we're probably gonna go do that now.
Yes.
And
all right. Yes. Okay. So we'll shoot for ominous ukulele next week. We're getting a lot of requests for ominous ukulele.
I could bring my theremin.
Ooh, you could. You could bring your accordion. See, I still think you should bring the accordion. T has an accordion.
I don't know how to play it.
No one knows how to play an accordion. Like everyone's just faking it. They're not a real instrument. Like they're collective illusion. No, the great thing about accordions is they actually sound pretty impressive, even if you have no idea how to play one, which I learned once T got an accordion.
I have an accordion and I have a theremin.
Yes. How hard would it be to set up the theremin in here?
It would not be hard.
Could we live stream and just sort of move through the theremin fields the entire time?
Yeah.
So that when we gesticulated, it would make creepy music.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So I
think
we're
probably be back in a week or so, unpredictably. There's not really any set plan or schedule for this, but we'll try to do it semi-regularly, and you can follow it here.
Everybody stay safe. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands a ton. Again, you can follow us on social media, not on Twitter, not lasers.
Teaberry Blue.
T like spelled out, T-E-A.
Tea like the drink, berry like the fruit, blue like the color.
Thank you for joining us. You are super awesome. We will look through the chat, but it seems like you've all been very nice, and we appreciate that.
Thank you for behaving.
And if there's anything that you specifically want to see or ask, tweet at us. That's probably the easiest way to get that on our radar. And we're going to end the live stream
Good
now.
night. Good night.
And thank you to Waylon, the plush alligator, for holding up the computer.
Yes. Thank you, Waylon.